and welcome to Conversations with Professor Brown. Thank you for joining us. This evening's conversation is focused on grief, trauma, and healing, dedicated to Breonna Taylor. Our panelists are Dr. Roz, Dr. Hall, and Reverend Johnson Veasley. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Roz.
Yes, if you are streaming or if you're watching on Facebook, I know we had some technical difficulties, but if you are there, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box and we will try to answer those. I think Professor Brown will field those to us as we are going along with the seminar, and we will try to answer your questions as best as possible.
Dr. Hall?
I would like to say good evening. It is a delightful Thursday evening when all the madness and chaos surrounds. There are still quiet, still places and places we can come as a community, as a clan, as a tribe, to talk about the things that concern us, move us, cause us grief, and cause us moments to pause and think about our place in the world, and gives us an opportunity to think about how we can more aptly empower ourselves. So I welcome each and every one of you, and I have a special welcome to the students in my courses at Baltimore City Community College. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Reverend Johnson Veasley?
Hi, yes, good evening, everyone. I'm thrilled to be on this webinar this evening with Professor Brown. And as we've heard, we are thankful for this space where we can come together and talk. And we look forward to all that this evening will bring us as we move forward together.
Thank you so much. So as Dr. Ross said, we're going to move through different series of questions focused on grief, trauma, and healing. And along the way, if you have questions, please type them in the chat. We did receive some questions via email, which we will answer at the end during the question and answer period. And if by chance we do not get to your question, please email me at tanya@tonyambrown.com, and I will make sure that I connect you to the panelists that can answer your question. And at this time, we're going to get started. Breonna Taylor was a 26-year-old African-American woman who worked full-time as an ER technician and EMT. She was a daughter. She loved cars. She loved her friends. She loved life. Unfortunately, she was shot and killed by Louisville police officers on March 13th during a raid of her apartment while she was sleeping. Esteemed panel, why do you believe Breonna's death has caused the African-American community so much pain?
Well, I think in terms of why it's caused so much pain is the reality is this: that could be either one of us. We all go to sleep at night. We all expect to wake up in the morning. We don't expect to be shot in our sleep. We don't expect for police to get away with the murder. And then if someone wrongs us, we really don't expect for the Attorney General to take forever to press charges. And so just the way that everything took place, Breonna Taylor could have been our sister. She could have been our mother. She could have been us. And I think that's why it's impacted us in such a way, because it's like, my goodness, we're not even safe in our own homes. We're not safe in our beds. We're not safe sleep. It's like, when do we, as African Americans or people of color, when do we feel safe? When do we ever have the opportunity to feel safe? And I think, if you think about the situation with Botham Jean, he was killed eating ice cream in his home, and so there are all these situations that are taking place with the people who are supposed to protect and serve us, yet they are the ones that are causing harm. And, unfortunately, we all waited with bated breath for the verdict, and for it still not to go in our way when it just appeared to be like undeniable in terms of pressing charges. I mean, they already had the person in custody that they were looking for. You know, they were at the wrong house. I mean, it was just so many things of negligence that to hear that, you know, her walls will see justice and she will not receive justice, it's heartbreaking. And it's like, when do we, as people of color, when do we, as women of color, when do we, as Black people, get the opportunity to feel treated equally? When do we get the opportunity to be victims without someone trying to make us a perpetrator to dispel the idea that we are a victim? It was ridiculous in terms of how they were trying to, you know, say that she was involved in this and tried to get her boyfriend to say that she was a part of this to make her less of a victim. And that only happens to us. That only happens to people of color when we have been victimized, that we are then in turn deemed as a perpetrator, as if we're not worthy, and I don't want to say of the status of being a victim, but as we are not worthy of having empathy because of what has happened to us. So I think that's why it's resonated with us so much. And I think that's why it's been so problematic with us so much, because it's just like, we're tired. We're
Yes.
just at a point where we are tired. And this should have been an easy case to get a conviction. And unfortunately, her walls were more protected than she was. And that, when you think about that in just the most humane way, how could her walls, right? Her walls, how can a building get a conviction and her lifeless body not? So it's baffling, it's appalling, it's frustrating, and we're tired. We're just tired.
Dr. Hall, thank you, Dr. Ross. Dr. Hall.
So Dr. Ross covered many of the things that are just on my mind right away. I think about her and I say, beyond that, it could have been me, because I'm in this maternal headspace right now. I became a grandmother in 2020, double. So the first thing I thought is that could have been my child, and she could have been my grandchild. I think about it when I say, so that's the legacy of the family. That's generational bonds broken, severed. I think about this, 12:40 in the morning, sleeping in your bed, in your abode, you work hard to pay for. There is a bang, not a knock, banging on the door. You get up to head towards the door. Before you can get there, you are shot dead. Pardon me, you are shot 6 times. You fall in your hallway and you die a short time after. Now, she was alive briefly. And I think about that moment for me. No attempt to save her life. No attempt to call a paramedic. No attempt to do anything that we consider just to be humane. That many of us would do for someone we didn't particularly care for if we saw them injured or hurt.
Absolutely.
And then today, to wake up and find that there's a delay in the release of the recordings, despite the fact that the judge said release them, the prosecutor's office spends. So when you talk about value, I'm with you on that one, Dr. Ross. So there is more value, and forgive me, I just got excited and my phone hit the floor. There's more value in them taking extra time to do what? Redact the names of the witnesses on a piece of paper, rather than do what the prosecutor could have done, and that is to bring the appropriate charges or consideration of charges before the grand jury. Because some, and this is what I got, and I'm going to read it. The report says that they're not even sure if the option to charge the officers with murder was ever presented by the prosecutor to the grand jury. So you can't charge people with something that's not placed before you. And if it's not placed before you, then it says to me that the prosecutor and the police department and all of the governmental agencies involved in that little small decision not to do that already wanted an outcome, and it was not justice for Breonna Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Hall.
You're welcome.
Reverend Johnson Beasley.
Asking the question, why has this caused so much pain? I certainly agree with everything that has been shared, but what came to mind is we cannot recover from one experience before another is unleashed on us, before more pain. So we had Ahmaud in February, Breonna in March, George Floyd in May, Rashard in June, and there's so many more names. So just countless names. So we cannot heal because there's more pain and more hurt and harm inflicted. And I think it caused pain because we see this double standard. We see a lack of accountability, and we have family members and communities waiting and watching to see if justice will be served, if proper punishment or fair treatment is going to be handed down, and will these wrongs be made right? And we don't see that happening. I think it also causes pain because for generations, our grandmothers and great-grandmothers and grandfathers have been crying out over the same acts of violence committed against us as a people. And in ministry, thinking about the Imago Dei, we're all created in the image of God. And so to be treated as if our lives don't matter, it causes pain. And again, a young lady so full of promise, gone too soon, and just utter disregard. So it is immense pain. And again, we can't come up for air before seemingly more pain is inflicted upon us as a community and a people.
Dr. Ross, Dr. Hall, I see you shaking your heads. Do you want to add something to that?
Go ahead,
Well,
Dr. Ross.
Thank you. You know what, as you were saying, like, we just have not had the opportunity to recover, and it's not natural. It is not natural to see this level of disregard for our lives. It's almost like we're fighting a war. It's almost like we're in the Middle East fighting a war or something. It is just not natural for these things to happen. And one other point, I'm like you now, Dr. Hall, I'm getting all excited.
But you know what? We're talking about family. We're talking about, this is, flesh of our flesh, skin of our skin, our babies, our children, our sons, our daughters, our uncles, our aunts, our nieces. Yes, we can't just sit by and behave as if it is, you're killing our people, our family. You're killing us.
And what people didn't realize is that the Attorney General did not have to convene a grand jury. He could have pressed charges on his own. He took the cowardice way out so that this wouldn't reflect on him in the next election. And for that, I say, if nothing else, for Breonna Taylor, make sure you know who you were voting for.
That's right.
Make sure you know who you're voting for and vote them out.
Right.
You know, the Attorney General, he got married during the process of, he was living his life as if he didn't have a job to do. And it's embarrassing because as a person of color, as a man of color, when he got up to grandstand to do his press, to do the press, he's like, as a Black man, no, not today. You don't get to say that. Because as a Black man, you should have just pressed charges and let the chips fall where they may. The jury made a decision that's different. As a Black man, you allowed the administration there in Kentucky to use you in a way that was not going to be beneficial to Breonna Taylor. And the writing was on the wall. Before they even made the announcement, they cleared that whole city out.
Sure did.
They shut the city down. So they knew. They knew going into this that there was not going to be any justice. And I think that's the infuriating part, because you're right, Reverend Beasley, we can't get any relief. When my husband leaves to go to work, when I say be careful, that's a very different kind of be careful. It's not be careful because, don't have a wreck. No, it's be careful because I know about 2 miles up the road, the cops hang out because they, want to give tickets. They hang out in a little, in a little dig up the road. And so I'm like, when you pass that area, don't give them no reasons. But here's the truth. As people of color, we don't have to give them a reason for them to kill us. And that is the part why it's resonated with so much. I think that is the part that is just heartbreaking, because we are just stuck in this place of knowing that we probably will not get justice. And, people are like, well, the family got money. That money does not equate to life. That money is not going to bring Brianna back. That money is going to be for the family members who are dealing with this trauma. The way that they lied to her mother when she was 18, and they knew that they let her child bleed out. They knew that they did not do everything that they were supposed to do to care for her life. And they told lies to her mother. I mean, that amount of money that she got will never suffice the loss of her child. I'm sorry. I just, thinking of the Attorney General just makes my blood vessels boil.
I was getting ready to say lit a little fire there, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because, all you can do is you get heated and hot. And so just to add this other dynamic is, with all of this, then we become unhealthy.
Yes.
As people, then we become unhealthy, because you cannot have a diet of constant trauma and racism and injustice and brutality. You cannot constantly eat and drink that without it having an effect on you. Yes. It is going to have an effect on you whether you are consciously aware of it or not. Whether it's that knot in my stomach that I didn't have a year ago that is almost constant now. You talked about your husband leaving the house. Oh my goodness. I talk about my knees are bruised, in the last year. I pray regularly. I pray old school way. On my knees, but my knees are bruised because my husband can do something like just go out to care for his cousin, just go to get groceries for his cousin, or just go to drop something off to my mom's house. And I am literally like focusing on what I have to do over here. But then this whole other half of me, everything has changed. My blood pressure, the way my heartbeat, everything is increased. And that is one of the things that we also don't talk about in the process, what it does to us, the state of dis-ease we're in. Not just disease, but dis-ease. A constant state of that is so unhealthy. It increases the toxicity in the body. It does not allow the oxygen to even move through the body, and feed the brain. The brain is not being fed properly. There are just so many things that are happening that you might just feel and go, oh, that's nothing. But that's a part of that tension. That tension that's back here, the tension in the neck, the tension in the back, the arms, the shoulder. That is because we are always, as a people, historically, always on guard. Always on guard. And then you talked about this, the Attorney General, and I'm just going, State's Attorney, I'm talking, okay, I'll just go back to my whole notion of minstrelsy, okay, and we're going to get you, or the whole notion of the hierarchy that was established in slavery. Oh, we don't need to get these folks to monitor these people. We'll get their own folk to stand in a position of overseership. And they will do our work for us by hurting their own folk. Because if nothing else, what he could have done was say, I step down. I can't do this. I resign, because clearly there are documents that they're posting now. So, some documents, and I can't even believe them, because some documents have Breonna Taylor's address on it, right? And there's another one that didn't. So I'm thinking, okay, so now we're creating documents to justify what we did. Okay. And we're still, didacting. We're still putting those black lines there to hide out whole passages that would give truth and at least bring her mother, her family, some sense of transparency in the process. I can't imagine that feeling as a mother, as a grandmother, someone telling you, oh, we helped, oh, we did, it was just too. No, you didn't. The report clearly says that she was still alive, and they did nothing.
And that transitions us, Dr. Hall, to the conversation around grief. One definition of grief is deep sorrow, especially caused by someone's death. When we lose a loved one, the pain sometimes comes in waves, and there are triggers such as a song, a thought, or a memory. Last fall, I taught a student whose son was recently shot and killed. Her grief was raw, her pain was real. Dr. Hall, we will start with you. In your work as an educator of young adults, how have you seen your students move through grief and achieve greatness amongst loss?
Now, I read that all day yesterday, and I just thought I had the answer down pat. But honestly, when you were reading the question again, to be quite frank, I started to well up, to tear up, because I've always said that we serve some of the most amazing, brilliant young people on the planet. They are brilliant. They just don't know they're that brilliant. Because you have a society that suggests they're inadequate. You have a society that suggests, it says every single day what they feel is invalid. They don't have a right to feel. So I have seen my students overcome so much adversity from, well, we're out here, so let's just roll with it. Let me be my authentic self as I encourage my students to be theirs. I've seen my students survive horrendous trauma, sexual, mental, verbal abuse, to the point where, parents have tried to kill them or have tried to kill their siblings. And so you've got, students who are in the middle of trying to matriculate and finish their classes. When we were on campus, having to leave my class to go to court to press charges against a father or a mother who has attempted to kill and murder them. So I see my students, what we might have had to deal with, I'll speak for myself, what I had to deal with at 20, 21, 22, 17, 18, our students as early as 14, 15, if they're in dual enrollment, we didn't have to do that. We didn't have to help pay a mortgage. We didn't have to work to pay the mortgage. We didn't have to take care of our parents. We did not have to be in situations where people are given the authority to make your life miserable. I'll never forget the incident that was in the Baltimore Sun, where a student wrote their professor and said, my parent just died. And the professor wrote back and said, okay, but sorry to hear that, your paper's still due and it can't be late. And I just went, why are you an educator? Why are you even in the classroom? Why are you even connected or talking to other human beings? Because that kind of mindset and attitude, you should be in a hermit, you should be in a cave somewhere all by yourself. If you don't understand death and loss, and you have no compassion or empathy to reach out to another human being. And I said to myself, I bet you if the student was of a different hue, you might not have said the same thing, because the professor didn't look like any of us, all right? And I think about that. I just simply want my students to thrive, despite the fact that this is a world right now that is doing everything but allowing our people to thrive. It's as if I want to cut you off at the roots so that you can't reach your full potential. So I see my students dealing with it. I always tell them I have an open door policy. I might not have all of the answers, but if you need somebody to talk with, I can listen. I've had a lot of traumatic situations occur to me in my life. I'm certainly old enough to have had some experiences. I don't believe that we have to experience every single thing in life to learn from it. I think you can learn from other folks' mistakes too, but you can't learn from it if folk won't talk about it.
Right.
So that's one of the things that we have to start doing. That's why I wanted to be a part of this. We have to start talking about what we've lived through and our experiences. You know, so I know about racism firsthand. I know about running home at 5 years old, trying to get to my mother because they were throwing rocks at me in California. I know what it's like to be backed up in a corner in North Carolina and have my 2 long braids cut off. And have somebody smash a banana in my mouth and call me a monkey. I know what it means to be called out of my name for any reason. I know what it means to be dragged off of a bus in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and not know if I was going to get home from school to see my mother and my father. So they are when I see this happening again, I'm really incensed and I'm sad and I'm angry and I'm invigorated to get into politics and, you know, almost invigorated to change my whole lifestyle at this point, my whole career, because we are not doing some of the basic things we can do. So I help my students, I watch them, I try to empower them, and I want them to, more than anything else, know they are not alone in this thing. They are not alone. And how to grieve and to grieve. And it's okay to cry and it's okay to grieve. And I don't care who says you shouldn't cry. Cry. If that's what you need to do, cry. If you need to scream and holler and break things, not other people's things, your things. If you need to break things, do that. You know, don't hurt yourself though. But do what you need to do to work through it, because no one knows the degree of pain that you are experiencing except you. And if you do not release it, you will continue to ingest it, and it will poison and paralyze you. So I let my students grieve however they want to grieve, and I let them know that I'm here for them.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Dr. Ross, can you talk to us about the stages of grief and how we can determine if professional help is needed in that when we're going through that process?
Great question. So there are about 5 stages of grief that we go through, and the one where people get stuck the most is the stage of being angry, because we get into a space of doing something that may get us in trouble. And so that's typically when someone may be in a space of needing a therapeutic intervention. And what I mean by that is if you are having situations taking place in 2 different locations, so say at school or at work and in your home, and you know, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of things taking place and you're not yourself, then that is the time that, first of all, I would tell anyone that's going through any trauma, right, that you are going to experience grief. So I encourage anyone to do grief counseling, just in general. But when you get to that stage of being angry and recognizing that you're behaving outside of yourself, that is probably when I encourage people to think about reaching out for a therapeutic intervention. And I say this with all due respect, Reverend Beasley, you know, in our community, people think that they can pray the pain away, you know, and so I like to tell people that you can pray and go to therapy. It is quite okay.
Yeah, it is.
God will send you someone in your life like myself, like Professor Tonya Brown, who has this background, mental health background, that can help you through the situation. So I always encourage people to really take the time to be in tune with what you feel, and whatever you feel is valid. I tell people all the time, your feelings are your feeling. If you feel that way, it is valid to you. It's what you do in that emotional process that makes the difference. So if you're very sorrowful and, you know, you're overwhelmed and in the depressed state, and you're at the point of probably losing your job because you're just like, I can't go to work now, you know, that's a different conversation we need to have. We need to have a conversation about, do we need to get you to a therapist? Do we need to try to see if we can do medication therapy as well, so that we can get you to a functioning space? You know, but if you are overwhelmed, you know, like you, Dr. Hall, I believe in a good cry. I believe in letting it all out. I believe in letting it go, because the reality is this: if you suppress it, it's going to show up in your life in different ways.
Mhm.
It will show up. And so it is better to deal with it and to manage it rather than to suppress it. And, you know, I don't mind self-disclosing. We lost my father in 2013.
Mhm.
And my parents had been married for 47 years at the time of his death. My sisters and I, we were so concerned about our mother that we didn't really grieve our father until about 2 years later,
Mm.
Mm.
because we were so concerned that, is she gonna make it? All she knew was my father. They had been together ever since they were in 8th grade, never had another boyfriend or girlfriend. And so they were each other's world. They were married more than they were single. You know, they met as teenagers. And, you know, we were in a constant state of, is mom okay? We were fielding her to different homes. It's 4 of us. So she was spending time at different homes so none of us would be burned out, you know, for trying to make sure she was okay. But we were terrified. We were terrified. And it wasn't until I want to say maybe it was the holidays that my sisters and I, we were finally able to have a great cry. Like, we were finally able to say that we were struggling with the loss of our father. Like, we knew we were going through the motions. Like, on Father's Day, we would check in on each other. And I'm like, nope, I'm still in bed. Don't want to be on social media. Don't want to see everybody with their dad. You know, we were going through those things, holidays. I don't want to see any of that. You know, we knew we were going through that process. But, you know, I'm grateful to say now that we are on the other side of it, because we took the opportunity to deal with what we were going through. And we were trying to be so strong. And sometimes you have to be strong for you. You have to be strong for you. And you have to recognize what you need. You have to recognize what your body is telling you. That's why I tell people to get in tune with your emotions. Because when they are in a place where you might need therapeutic intervention, then you're able to recognize that before it does become something disastrous like legal. You know, you're able to say, this is not my norm. I don't feel like this all the time. Something does not feel well with me right now. You know, and so you are able to be very in tune. You are able to recognize that I need to reach out. And again, if you are having, you know, difficulties in 2 settings, that's very important. If you're having difficulty in 2 settings, that's the time that you know that maybe what you're feeling is a bit overwhelming and you may need therapeutic intervention. So for your students, if they're struggling in school and can't maintain school and then they can't maintain work, that's when they may need therapeutic intervention. Or if you're struggling at home, you know, you cannot maintain your home and then you cannot maintain school or you cannot maintain your work. Just in those 2 separate settings where you are exhibiting some issues, that's when you know that you need therapeutic intervention. And let me just say this, therapy is the absolute best thing you can do for yourself. It is the most courageous thing that you can do for yourself. And once you get on the other side of it, it is an amazing, amazing experience, because you see yourself differently. You have a different perspective on life and you have clarity. That's the best thing that therapy will do for you. It will provide you with clarity. So you'll get that understanding of yourself and the world around you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. Reverend Johnson Beasley, what role does faith and spirituality play in our healing?
So thank you for the question. And Dr. Ross, I couldn't agree with you more. I believe that along with praying, if I have heart disease, I'm praying and I'm going to plan to see my cardiologist.
Thank you.
I'm going to follow up. So I'm going to thank God for subject matter experts. So I believe in that wholeheartedly. When thinking about the role that our faith and spirituality play, with full respect for the fact that we may each have a different higher power or religious tradition or spiritual beliefs, there are 3 things that come to mind. Faith and spirituality give us hope, strength, and it enables us to respond in love. And when I think about hope, it gives us the hope, and we're reminded that God is who he says he is. It doesn't matter what we see. There is no changing with him. So God is a God of love, grace, and mercy, but we're also reminded that God is a God of justice. And he said in Amos 5:24, let justice roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. So that's in his word. That's what God stands by. When I think about strength, faith and spirituality gives us the strength to protest. It gives us the strength to press on. It gives us the strength to realize that our actions and our labor, those things are not in vain. And I also thought about strength because sometimes on this journey and seeing all that we see, I don't know about you, but there have been times when I've been a little weak. I've been weak with trying to deal with the stresses, stomach and knots, dealing with anger. But there's a scripture that reminds us in 2 Corinthians 12 that Jesus said, my power is made perfect in your weakness. So that strength and what he has in those moments, that's when God steps in and says, here's how you're going to make it. The last thing is faith and spirituality. It enables us to respond in love. And we have to remember that hatred stirs up strife. As Dr. Hall said, with hatred and anger, our nerves get bad, we're not resting, other physical manifestations. So we have to remember that the God we serve is a God of love, and we cannot allow our hearts to be filled with hate. So in the midst of all that we see, we have to remember that we are called to display strength, and that because of who we serve, we are called to display love, because love covers a multitude of sins. And even if we don't see it, don't understand it, it seems like it's going to be a long time coming. Remember, the God we serve said, I am the God of justice. And when God comes off his throne, he handles business, and he knows how to level the playing field, and he knows how to settle the account. So that's what faith and spirituality will do for us as we work to find healing during these situations.
Thank you so much. Dr. Ross and Reverend Johnson Beasley, how is grief different? Now, this is something that is really applying to a lot of attendees tonight. How is grief different when the death of a loved one is unexpected? Dr. Ross, we'll start with you.
You know, that's a great question. It's different because you don't have the opportunity to prepare. Mm-hmm. And if there is some unfinished work between you and the individual, then typically people carry that guilt. So say you had an argument maybe a week prior, and you never circled back around to say, hey, you know, I'm sorry, it really wasn't that serious. People who are left behind, right? They are, and I say left behind like people choose to die, but you know, people who are still here, they have a sense of guilt because they did not rectify the problem, which is why if you have issues with someone, I am a proponent of resolving those issues, resolving them as soon as you can, because you don't know the day, you don't know the hour, you don't know what may happen. You know, bless my poor husband's heart. If we have a passionate conversation, I won't say argument. We have a passionate conversation, you know, he already knows that nobody's going to bed in this house. Like, we're going to be up working it out, because it's not going to be on my guilty conscience that I did not say I'm sorry, that I offended him, and I don't want it on his either. And so I think you have to be proactive in your life, in your relationships with people, that when there is an offense, that you resolve the offense.
Yes.
You know, you really resolve it, because at the end of the day, and, you know, I self-disclosed about my father. My father's death was unexpected. You know, when he woke up in the middle of the night, was going to go to the restroom, he lost his balance and hit his head on the marble nightstand. And so he hit his temple, and unfortunately, you know, they couldn't get his organs revived after that. And so we were not prepared for that, because I just had a conversation with my dad, and I was prepared. My whole family's in Georgia. I was preparing to see my dad soon. We were going to be there. Yeah, it happened in February. We were going to be there at the end of February, beginning of March. So, you know, and I had just seen my dad 2 weeks prior, you know, so he was in good shape, good health. You know, we were laughing because my nephew had just gotten married. And so it was a fun family event. You know, we had a great time. So I was so grateful that I was home, that I had that opportunity, because if not, I'm not sure if his death if I would have been able to handle it, because sudden death is very hard. And I think that's the hardest part about loving and trusting and wanting to be a part of life with other people, because that loss is so magnified. It's like the gift and the curse, right? When you have that individual in your life that you love so much, and then you lose them to something like death, it feels like abandonment. It feels like they've abandoned you. And so that's why it is, that's why it's a little bit different with when sudden death happened, the grief, because it's coupled probably with guilt, it's coupled probably with feelings of abandonment, and believe it or not, rejection. And it sounds weird because a person can't control when God calls them home, right?
Right.
But you will often hear people say, I hear clients say all the time, why did they leave me here to deal with this life? They feel abandoned, they feel rejected, like, or why would God think that I'm strong enough to deal with this? I'm not strong enough to deal with this. So it's a multitude of emotions that we experience that makes the difference between something that you can prepare for. Say if my father was sick, I can mentally prepare myself for that. But to have just been with him 2 weeks prior, we were having a great time at a family wedding, and then to get a call at 3 a.m, from my sister screaming frantically, and I hear my mother screaming, I'm like, what is happening? Anytime you get a call like that anyway, it's like, what's happening with the family? So the difference is that you don't have the opportunity to mentally prepare.
So what I heard was that we can't prepare feelings of abandonment, rejection. That's powerful, Dr. Ross. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Reverend Johnson Beasley?
So agree with everything that Dr. Ross just shared. Death is painful. Death stings. Jesus cried over his friend Lazarus. And so as I was thinking about unexpected versus expected, imagine being on a street corner and we see someone approaching us and we know that they're going to cause harm. We can assume a fighting position, embrace ourselves, and get ready for it. And even if we get knocked down, we can still get back up. We know what we're dealing with. But thinking about, on the other hand, death unexpected, if we get hit from behind, minding our own business, we don't know what has happened. We have to get up to try to figure out what's going on. I have not had a chance to ready myself. So recovery can take longer. And also thinking about unexpected, in the case of Brianna, investigations are going on, legal aspects. So the family has to relive it. They're reliving it constantly with that unexpected piece. Still very painful, but we don't get the gift of time. Essentially, when it's an unexpected death, may not have that chance to say goodbye, I love you, sit at the bedside and help usher mom or dad as they make their transition, or any family member. So those are just some of the differences. So I think that one difference is the ability to cope is reduced when it's unexpected versus being an expected transition.
Thank you, Reverend. Dr. Hall, I saw you nodding. Did you want to add something?
I think that it's the whole notion of that old adages my great aunts and everybody used to say, a parent never expects their child to go before them. We kind of have these expectations of life. And I'm nodding because I listened to my fellow panelists, and I'm just thinking, we really can't prepare for that. You really can't prepare for how you will respond to it, how it will affect you. You can prepare, and I say this, you can prepare yourself intellectually, and that's how I'm going to say it. You can intellectualize this thing called death all day and all night, but when you have to deal with it, it is absolutely something altogether different. There's no script for it. How it feels for one family, one person is very different from the way it feels to another person in that family, and everybody has got to. It's a livable moment. It's a livable moment. When my girlfriend lost her husband, and they were just high school sweetheart, actually probably middle school, they started liking each other. So they're the only, that's the only man she's ever known. And she just did not want She wanted nothing to do with this thing called life. She wanted nothing to do with it. I literally was watching herself will herself into a decimated state. She was dying. She was willing herself to death. And, you know, yes, I was a practicing drama therapist in New York and got all that there. But the reality is when it is somebody you love and it's up close and personal,
Right.
all that education, all that theory, you have to kind of go with this. Whatever's in here is what you're going with. I'm grateful that I'm a God-fearing woman because I could say to her, you loved him so much, he loved you so much. Would he want you to live or die? Would he want you to live or die? You know, and she kind of looked at me and I said, right. You were so you start talking about priest and priestess, and you know, he did everything he could to try to make this world, I always will call it, in the midst of its chaos and pure unadulterated evil, I might add. He did his best to keep you safe. He did his best to make sure you understood how very much he loved you. He wanted you to shine. Wanted your light to shine. So why would you extinguish your own light in the midst of all that? Do you know, so I had to get a hardcore girlfriend. So you think you're honoring him when you don't eat for 4 straight days? You think you're honoring him when you won't eat for 4 days? You're not, you know. And she very much, you know, faith-based, but I will tell you, in the midst of those situations, now I'm clear God never leaves you or forsakes you. I'm clear about all that. I am. Like I said, I'm here. I read my word, it's here. But when you are in the midst of going through a thing, if you don't have somebody else speaking life into you in this process, you can't hear it. You can't pull that up on your own. When it is raw for you. So I read a book a while back, and I want to say it was called Radical. And there was this one passage in it, and it said, the kind of people that I would like to surround myself with are those who remember the words to my song when I forget them. Or when I forget how to sing them. So that's what we talk about, the community, the clan, the tribe, us collectively as a people. It's not always the people that you are blood tied with. It can be the people that you meet along your journey. But it is the notion that we do not get through this world alone. We cannot get through this world alone. We weren't made for that. We were always made to be connected to one another. In love.
In love.
Professor Brown, may I say one thing?
Oh, absolutely.
As we were all talking, one of the things I thought about with this coping is anger at God. The reality is sometimes death is so painful that we are angry at God, and that's part of the recovery. But I'm glad to know that we serve a God who's big enough and strong enough to hold us and carry us and rock us and see us through when we are wrestling with feelings and all the grief and the reactions. But sometimes there's that anger at God, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it. Again, we can talk about it, but that's one thing that I wanted to share along with what we've said.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hall, as you were talking and you highlighted the importance of having people to speak life into you, I was reminded about when I went through a difficult time at work and you spoke life into me. When I went through a difficult time, when I first came to Baltimore City Community College and I felt like life was falling apart, Reverend Johnson Beasley and my mother helped me put my life back together. I remember being on a panel with Dr. Roz when we were lecturing about mental health, and she told her testimony about being in a car accident and how she put her life back together. I hope it's okay that I shared that, Dr. Roz.
Absolutely.
And so I always say when I get into these dark moments, and you all are evidence of this, one of the best things that I've ever done in life is to build relationships with people, because God sends us people to put us back together, right? And He understands the stages of grief, and that's why it really is okay, as Reverend Johnson Beasley just said, to say, I'm angry. I'm angry with God. That's human. You know, why did this happen? How am I going to get through this? And I mean, listening to you all, I'm just sitting here like, I just want to start taking notes. Is there, I want to jump into the audience because I am just learning so much from the three of you. And I mean, I've been doing this for several months now, and I'm literally sitting here holding back tears because I'm just so moved, lady. So I just want to pause. I'm going to say it at the end, but I want to stop and say now, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're going to transition to trauma. Mental Illness Awareness Week starts on Sunday, October the 4th. Dr. Ross, in the face of trauma, specifically racial trauma, what is the impact on mental health?
Well, we touched on it a little bit earlier. It affects us. It shows up in our body. You know, you wake up one morning, you're like, why is my knee hurting? Like, and you hadn't hit your knee up against anything. Like, there's no reason or rhyme for you to have knee pain. And you're like, what happened? But I bet you if you do an evaluation of how you're emotionally feeling, you know, then you connect the two, because emotional and biological, they will always be linked. So if you're emotionally overwhelmed, then biologically there's going to be an issue. If you're biologically overwhelmed, you're also going to have an emotional issue. They're always linked. And so in that regard, trauma shows up in us whether we want to realize it or not, even when we think we have it all together. And just like the story that I shared when we were on the panel, when I got hit by the drunk driver, I didn't know if I was coming and going, and you know, I was scared to drive, and, you know, I really had to get myself together. But here I am, the great doctor. I should be able to handle, you know, that I'm having this traumatic moment. And as you said, to your point, Dr. Hall, all that education went out the way when I was sitting there looking like, you know, when I stopped on 495 because I saw a truck that looked like the truck that was sitting on top of my car, right? And I almost caused my own wreck, right? So, you know, it will show up, you know. And then when you think about this racial trauma, unfortunately, we can't do anything about our skin tone. We can't do a thing about our skin tone. So we can never get away from it. And that's the hard part for us. That's why we're really struggling with it, because we can't get away from it. We can't change what we look like. We can't move to a different community, because it can still happen in any community. We can't get behind, you know, a gated community. That's not gonna save us. Like, we feel like we don't have any respite from any of it. And because of that, it affects our mental health. We're walking around with migraines, right? Walking around in a state of anxiety. We're walking around anxious, looking over our shoulder. You know, I'm walking my dog and I'm nervous. You know, why? I feel like I'm in a safe community, but you never know, because Ahmaud Arbery was just jogging, and then he had to fight for his life. And so, you know, mind you, they weren't even law enforcement. You know, these were people who just decided, I'm going to take care of this person who may have committed a crime. Or Trayvon Martin.
Yep.
This baby walking home, went to go get some Skittles, and he's walking home in the neighborhood that he grew up in. But guess what? To George Zimmerman, he looked like he didn't belong there, so therefore he's a threat. So this idea that just the color of my skin makes me a threat, it's a hard cross to bear. And as we were having these conversations, when it happened with George Floyd, and, you know, may he rest in peace, because what happened to him opened the eyes of so many people. They could no longer deny that we are mistreated and we are mishandled. Those 8 minutes and, was it 39 seconds? 46 seconds. 8 minutes and 46 seconds of that man's neck on his, that man's knee on his neck. That's been our whole life. But the beauty is, as people of color, we're resilient.
Yeah.
Because we have had to deal with that all our lives, because we've had to deal with that all, they call it code switching when you know how to behave in different environments. We've learned how to do the code switch. We've learned how to make sure we get home safely for the most part. We learned to, see danger before danger has happened. We can pick up on it. We're very resilient in that, but we shouldn't have to be.
That's right.
And that's the hard part. We shouldn't have to be on guard. We shouldn't have to be in a space of thinking, oh, will I make it home safely today? I will never forget. I used to do this late night radio show in Baltimore, actually. And I was on 29 on my way home. I don't know if anyone is familiar with 29. I'm leaving Baltimore, going into Silver Spring, but it's a 2-lane kind of highway. It was midnight. It was after midnight. And I was driving. There was nobody on the road, honestly. And then I noticed that there was a cop behind me. Now, this may have been about 2 weeks after Sandra Bland, after the death. So I'm freaking out. I'm like, okay, then maybe he'll go around because it's just me and him. This cop stayed behind me for 30 minutes. By the time I got home, I was soaked in tears. I was too afraid to pick up my phone to call my husband because I didn't want to give any reasons, right? I was too afraid to do anything. And by the time I pulled into my street, because once I got off my exit, he kept going. But by the time I pulled on my street, I was crying like I was in 3rd grade, like just crying. I was so terrified for my life. And the thoughts that were going through my mind, is this going to be my last night? Is it my time now? Will they care that I just left a radio show talking about how people can have healthy relationships? Will they care? Will they care about the work I do in the community? Will they care? No, they're not going to care, because instantly I'm going to become some type of perpetrator, some type of person that looked like I needed to be. Well, there was no reason for this cop to be behind me for 30 minutes. He could have simply passed me. We had 2 lanes. He could have gone past me. There was no reason. And when I think about moments like that, and that's just one time, right? That's just one time that's happened. There are several moments that we all fear throughout the day that is showing up in us, because we always have to have it at the forefront of our minds that the color of our skin is a threat to other people. And that kind of racial trauma, it does not leave us. We've just become resilient to know how to deal with it. Just like you, Dr. Hall, I grew up in Georgia, kind of where where you're not liked. You know what I mean?
My son and my babies live in Georgia.
Yeah.
And yes, indeed.
And being called out of my name.
Better know, right? Better know where not to go.
Absolutely. Grew up in the Bible Belt, knowing where you can't be at night. Like it's ridiculous that you can't travel through certain states at night. It's just ridiculous, because you have to fear for your life. So that kind of racial trauma, that is going to affect you in one way or another. And we're seeing it now. We are all frustrated. We're at a point to where we're like, you know what? Not today. Which is why, I am not someone who's going to go out here and loot. Like, I'm not going to do it. But my goodness, I certainly understand it. I understand that level of frustration, because you cannot keep a bird caged for so long and think that they are not going to react. You just can't do it. And when we have our president who will not denounce white supremacy in a national debate, and then sends out a code to say, stand by. What does that mean? What do you think that means to people of color? Are you telling us that we can't do this? Are you telling us that that's the code language that you sent to them? Because they immediately, whoever the Proud Boys are, they immediately got on social media and said, we have our orders. Well, what are those orders? What do those orders mean? So that's the kind of stuff that people of color have to deal with. That's the kind of racial trauma that we have to live with. And when my majority of friends were reaching out saying, I want to be an ally, help me be an ally, I was like, it's not my job.
That's right.
We teach you how to be an ally. You cannot ask the oppressed to help you, because that's furthering oppressing us. It's not my job to teach you how to be a human. And at the end of the day, that's what this racial trauma is. It is humanity on display. How you discard people because of the color of their skin. So that's how racial trauma shows up with us mentally. Some people are going to be, you're going to have your Martin Luther Kings who are going to say be nonviolent, your John Lewis's who are going to say nonviolent, there's another way. And then you're going to have your Malcolm X who is by any means necessary. You're going to have people who say, no, we're not taking this. You know, I've seen shirts that say, don't let Trump get you hurt. We're not our ancestors. And when, you know, the reality of that is that that's a slight on our ancestors, because our ancestors fought too, you know. They just didn't have the opportunity to do it in ways that we do. But when you have people like Tamika Mallory, I love that sister to pieces. The way that she moved down to Kentucky to fight in the streets for Breonna Taylor. She just uprooted and moved to Kentucky to be on the front lines for Breonna Taylor, and to know that there are drones that are following her. There are helicopters, police helicopters that are hovering over the house that she lives in, where she doesn't feel safe. Her life is always a threat because here's the truth, because she's trying to do something for humanity. She's trying to protect humanity. And that is such a threat. That is a threat to her life. It's ridiculous. So absolutely, racial trauma is going to affect you mentally. It just
Absolutely.
how you respond to it. I'm not a fighter, never had a fighter in my life, but I'll write a fire letter to my, councilman, to whoever I got to call in government. I will get on their nerves about something that may be taking place in my community. I don't have a problem with that. We all fight and we all manage different ways. And so you have to figure out what's best for you.
Thank you, Dr. Roz. When we first came on the meeting tonight, we talked about how we will survive this. Dr. Roz reminded us that we will survive. Reverend Johnson Beasley, how can our spirituality, our faith base, usher us into healing?
Thank you for the question. I was thinking about a saying, or a quote rather, and it says, "Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal." Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal. And so grief and trauma are real. And I thought about Jesus when he was on the cross, and his mother was getting ready to go through grief and trauma because her son was dying. And so he looked down and told one of the disciples, "Behold thy mother." And he told his mother, "Behold thy son." In other words, I'm getting ready to leave here, but I want you all to establish a relationship and get connected here, because you're going to need each other to make it through what you're getting ready to go through. So when I think about the spiritual journey and that helping us to get on the pathway to healing, I thought about three things quickly here. When we have faith and we're spiritual and we have that journey, it connects us to a community of faith, other brothers and sisters who can pray for us and lift us up and see us through. We hear that Jesus is a burden bearer, but he's also called each one of us to bear ye one another's burdens. And so that's what that will do for us as we move to healing. Another thing is it connects us to Christ, and God calls us to trust him. And when we trust someone, we know they have our best interests. We know they'll see us through. And because God is trustworthy, we can think back to our ancestors and we see how God brought them through. And you're right, Dr. Roz, they were fighters. They may not have had all that we have, but they held it down and they put it down to get us to where we are now. And so we see that in them, being connected to Christ. He sees us through. He's carried our ancestors through. He's going to keep carrying us through. The last thing is the spiritual journey reminds us that we can pray, because prayer, you all, is the gateway to the throne. And when we get down, I heard Dr. Hall say her knees are bruised from prayer. Keep praying, because as we're praying, taking it all to God, anger, frustration, failures, fears, everything, we can lay it before God. He knows we think it anyway, right? We might as well tell him. He said, "Come boldly, run and tell me what you were thinking." Right. And as you pray to me, then I'm going to lead and guide you. So pray, seek my face, and watch what I'll do. I'm going to tell you the things to do to help yourself, your family, the community, to keep moving forward. Our labor isn't in vain. One person plants, somebody else does some watering, but God is going to give the increase.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Reverend Johnson Beasley.
Amen.
I know that's right. Amen, amen.
Dr. Hall, how can an educational journey and the arts help usher students and adults who are not in school to a place of healing? Because education doesn't have to necessarily be a formal education, but how can education take us to a place of healing as well?
So, as you know, Professor Brown, that is my little segue. So,
Yes.
sometimes, so that's the question I said I would answer this way. So, in addition to being an educator, so there are two loves that I have in terms of vocation, and one is the arts, and the other is teaching. And so, I would say that I know that each of us have multiple gifts, talents. Some of them have been identified. For some of us, we know what they are. And even as old as I am, and this whole quarantine process has taught me, hey, a few more gifts that I didn't think I had or would ever realize at 62. So this is how I'm going to answer that question, and it was inspired by my students. So I was talking with my students about just names and nomenclature and the whole notion of what we call things and why words can hurt. And so I said, they asked me, well, why don't you like being called out of your name? And I just went, okay, the best way for me to tell you this is to write my students a letter. And so that's what I did. And so with your indulgence, I'm not going to share the whole letter, but I will share portions of that letter with you now.
Okay.
Okay. So, dear world, it's difficult for me to write this letter because I feel very strongly about the effect words have on one's psyche, one's soul, one's life. We use words so carelessly today, and with the advent of alternative facts and an increased acceptance of racism and sexism by this country's sitting political machine, it seems that making America great again also means diminishing the rights and values of certain members of that society, especially those who look like me. So, how do I, as a woman, more specifically as a woman of color, feel about being called out of my name by both the media and society? Oh, let me count the ways. But I'll just start. My name is not Gold Digger, Ice Queen, Frumpy, Arm Candy, Femme Fatale, Gore Grimace. My name is not What's Her Face. My name is Woman. My name is not Cow, Hog Beast, Pigeon, Filly, Yak, Sow, Mule, or Chickenhead. My name is not Bird. My name is Woman. My name is not Big Booty, Judy, Aunt Jemima, or Baby Got Back. My name is not Titas Calientes. My name is Woman. My name is not Xbox, Shawty, Butterface, or Mud Pot. My name is not Skeezer. My name is Woman. My name is not Spinster, Cougar, Floozy, or GILF. What? You figure out the rest. My name is not Over the Hill. My name is Woman. My name is not Mammy, Conjure Woman, Loose Girl, or Half-Breed. My name is not Tragic Mulatta. My name is Woman. My name is not Whore, Cunt, Twat, Split, Gaping Hole, Snatch, Hottentot, Split Tail, Poontang, Hoochie, Scab, or Pass Around Pussy. My name is not Vagina. My name is Woman. My name is not Dyke, Freak, Side Chick, Amazon, Throwaway, Faghead, Butch, Mary, Macosas, or Carpet Muncher. My name is not Bean Flicker. My name is Woman. My name is not Slut, Prick Bunny, Crack, Crank, or Crack Whore, Dime, Ghetto, Hoe, Skank, Tart, Tramp, Skeezy Hoe, or Troll. My name is not Trick. My name is Woman. My name is Woman. And this woman is intelligent, bold, articulate, creative, loyal, proud, independent, beautiful, loving, ambitious, nurturing, sensual, inventive, assertive, logical, faith-filled, and overflowing. and a magnificent being. I am designed to withstand the effects of housing life within me, if I choose to do so. I am resilient and vibrant. I am ancient and deeply rooted. So when you see me crossing the street, riding the bus or train, sitting at a table across the room at an event, or walking down an escalator and can't remember who I am, instead of calling me out of my name, if all else fails, just call me woman. My name is woman. Her name was Breonna Taylor, woman.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. Thank you.
So the question was, and somebody said, what do I do when I don't have an outlet and I can't find a therapist? Let me tell you what I do. I scream, I holler, I cry, I pray. I scream, I holler, I cry, I pray. And then I use the gifts I have and I get them out there. I write, I get out my camera, I'll make a short video. However I'm feeling, I get it out, because we would implode if we left all of this bottled up inside of us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. So we're going to transition now to the question and answer. Some of the questions have been answered. If there's anyone that wants to raise their hand, or if you've typed, ladies, if you see anything in the chat.
Yeah, Professor Brown, there is a question that I wanted to answer. Someone asked, how do you really deal with trauma when you don't have a therapist and you can't cry anymore? How do you deal with not having an out? I pray too, and I agree that you can talk to a therapist, but what if you don't have one, a good therapist? How long do you have to deal with trauma of death of a loved one? Very good question. And I'm glad that you asked that question, that your student asked that question, because the reality is this. You know, a lot of people may go to a therapist one time and they're like, oh God, this was a horrible experience. You know, so I encourage people that finding a great therapist is like finding a good shoe. You know, you may have to try on a couple before you find one that works with your personality, because we're human, we all have different lived experiences. But one thing you can do in the process of looking for a therapist, well, one thing that you can do is that you can dial 211 in any city that you live in, and it will provide you with local resources. So it can help you find, you know, housing and social services and things of that nature. So just like 911, it's 211. So that's one thing that you can do. But another thing that you can do, like what we like to call in the psychological world, is the cab effect. And so write this down, because I want you really to meditate on this, because when you do have those hard moments where you are triggered with your trauma, you can go back to this and make sure that you are not falling into the trigger of the trauma. And so the CAB effect stands for C, which is our cognitions. So cognitions are our thoughts. It's how we receive information. It's our information processing. So cognitively, how we are understanding things. A stands for affect. Affect is our feelings. It's our mood state. It's how we feel. And B is simply behavior, how we behave. So here's something that I really want you to think about. Our thoughts influence our feelings, and our thoughts and our feelings influence our behavior. So if you have negative thoughts, you're going to have negative feelings, you're going to have negative behavior. You have positive thoughts, positive feelings, positive behavior. So people generally do not do an assessment of what they are thinking. They either have a behavior that they can't explain. You ever been in a situation where you've done something and you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea why I just did that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's human nature. We have all done it. We have all done it. Or you wake up one morning and say, you know, it's not my day. I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, right? But the reality is we wake up on the same side of the bed every single morning. So waking up on the wrong side of the bed has nothing to do with your mood state. But I tell you what does. The thoughts, if you did an assessment of your thoughts, what you were thinking, it will tell you why you're feeling the way that you are feeling. And then it's going to explain that behavior that you have done. Because what people notice more is they notice how you were feeling. So if you're moping around, they see that first. They see the behavior first. And so we don't even think about our thoughts. But if you monitor your thoughts, so for those who have had trauma, they've been dealing with their trauma and there's been some type of trauma-related issue, look at the evidence. Does the evidence line up with the idea of who you are? Does the evidence line up with the trauma? What I mean by that, say for instance that you, say you are a victim of sexual assault, right? And because of that, it's left you feeling some kind of way. You feel dirty. You feel like it's your fault. You feel like you could have done something different. You feel like all these other things. But the reality is, the person that violated you, that was their choice. It had nothing to do with you. I don't care if you showed up in the street butt naked. It does not give anyone the right to violate you. So, but because these things have happened to us, we think that we are at fault. We think that we're at fault. But the reality is, when you experience trauma, take yourself out of the equation. Take the blame off yourself. Because when you stay stuck in that blame, when you stay stuck in that guilt, it keeps you stuck in the emotional state. One thing about our feelings is that situations may influence our feelings, but it doesn't make the decision about how we feel. We are in ultimate control of how we feel. We determine how we feel every single day. I wake up and I may have some hard mornings where it's hard for me to get out the bed, but I wake up and I will say, Roz, we're gonna have a good day today, Roz. You're a bad girl today, Roz. We're gonna get this thing together, because I know that I need to jar myself into feeling a certain way, that I cannot stay rested in that emotional state. So I make a conscious choice and a conscious decision to feel how I want to feel. I can determine how I feel. And so sometimes when we experience trauma, we feel very powerless. We feel like we have no power. We feel hopeless. We feel helpless. But if you practice the cab effect, if you start monitoring your thoughts, if you start looking at how those thoughts are making you feel, and if you start understanding why you're behaving that way, you regain your power. You can recover from a traumatic situation. You can absolutely recover. God is a God that will take care of us all. He's just not going to punish you and leave you in the pits of hell because he thinks you're a bad person. He does not operate that way. If a trauma has happened to you, guess what? He allowed that trauma to happen, then he'll allow you to heal from it. We just get so very terrified about the healing process because it hurts. It hurts. You said that you can't cry anymore. If you can't cry anymore, now's the time to get creative. So write a letter. Write a letter about that pain. Write a letter about that trauma. Write a letter about everything that has hurt you. Write how you feel. Write it all down. And then when you're finished with it and you verbalize it and you say it out loud, then look at the evidence. Do you align with those thoughts? Are you worthy? Yes. Just you being here on this earth, you are worthy. Are you lovable? Yes, there's somebody in your life that loves you. Even when somebody has hurt you, it's somebody, it's your granny, it's your auntie, it's your lady down the street. Somebody loves you. You are not an unlovable person. You are not, you are worthy. You are not a person that does not deserve worth. And so when you start feeling those feelings or you start getting those triggers, then you have to look at the evidence. And if the evidence doesn't suggest what it is that you're thinking about yourself, then you know that you can get rid of that negative self-talk. Because when you get rid of those negative thoughts, guess what? Those negative feelings are going to dissipate too. And those negative behaviors, they're going to dissipate too. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I work with my clients at least 12 weeks for them to actually understand, for them to actually get it, that these negative self-talk is driving their behavior. It's not something, the trauma may have happened overnight, but the healing process takes time. You have to see yourself differently. And when you see yourself differently, accept that it happened to you. And that's the hardest part because we're in denial about what may have happened. But accept what may have happened to you and accept that someone made a choice for you. And the truth is, you do not have to walk around with the burden of somebody else's choice.
Mm.
Recognize that. And when you realize that, you can begin your healing process. You can start to heal. You can see where you need to heal. Where is it affecting you at? And, you know, like I had, again, education went out the window when, you know, my father died. Like I wasn't thinking about healing. I was thinking I want my daddy.
Right.
You know?
Mm.
And then I had to realize, well, what was it that I wanted about my daddy? My father was stability. My father was a provider. I knew he loved me. I knew that he would go to the ends of the world for me. So that was such a great loss because, not saying that my husband wouldn't, but I knew my father had to because I was his blood. I knew that he would, you know. And so that idea, what was bothering me the most while I was struggling with healing is because of that idea of that loss. Because I felt like I had lost those things. But when I really started thinking about it, I can be that for myself. I can be that person to go to the end of the world for myself. I can take my power back. I don't need someone else to care for me. I can do that for myself. I can manage me. I can take care of myself. And so really getting through your trauma, and I know it's a long answer to your question, and I do apologize that, but getting through your trauma is recognizing that you do have power. And that's how you heal. You do have power in this situation. None of us are powerless because we choose how we feel and we can choose how we think about situations and we can choose our behavior. And so once you understand that whole effect, that whole idea of my thoughts, they're going to influence my feelings and my thoughts and my feelings are going to influence my behavior, you are very much in control of that. You are very much in control of that. I hope that answered your question. I know it was a long answer, but I just didn't want to leave you out there.
Thank you. She said she appreciated the long answer. She
Oh,
typed that. She said,
perfect.
thank you. Thank you.
Perfect.
So does anyone want to raise their hand and come on live to ask any of the panelists a question? All of the questions that were submitted via email have been answered throughout the discussion. Well, seeing none, we are going to close with inspirational thoughts, so closing words. We'll start with Dr. Hall, then we'll go to Dr. Roz, and then Reverend Johnson Beasley.
So I guess I'll pick up where I started. One of the first things I really want to say is this thing called life is tricky enough to get through, no matter what age you are, no matter what you've experienced. Every day is a new day. It brings new experiences, opportunities, and challenges to your front door. I would say you have to love yourself. You must love yourself. You have got to love you beyond anything that is happening outside of you. I used to, well, actually still keep it. When I was going through some rough times, just as a survivor of sexual abuse, disclosure, and I was struggling. And Dr. Ross mentioned this whole thing, and when she said it, I sort of smiled. She said, "Well, you feel dirty and you don't understand. It wasn't your fault. You didn't do that." And so I sort of just really spent a whole lot of time, quite frankly, talking to God. I spent a whole lot of time talking to God because I had to figure out why it happened, why me, why this person. And you know, when you know the person and you think the person would never do such a thing, that just creates all these multiple layers of you can't trust, that was family. How do you do that? Do you tell the other people because they'll hate you because you're little? Because that person, you think you'll divide people. You think, you know, social services will come and take folk away. And it's just too much for a little child to have had to deal with. okay? All of it, the act and all of the ensuing guilt. But in my conversation with God, I just need to tell you that it was just like something really plain and simple. And through tears, I just heard this voice in my head, and I wrote down what I was told. And I've kept it ever since. It sits on my desk under, my desk cover, and it's simply this: your worth is great indeed.
Mm.
Thank you, Dr. Hall.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your transparency.
Yes.
You're welcome. We can't heal and we can't help if we can't tell the truth.
Thank
Amen.
you. Dr. Ross, closing words?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to encourage your audience that healing is possible. Even when it feels impossible, it is possible. And you have to push yourself to heal. You have to. Healing is your responsibility for anything that has happened to you. And while that may sound harsh, at the end of the day, you have to live with you every single day. And I just want to say this, that you are not your mistakes. You are not. Even though they may be showing up in your life, they may be causing great pain in your life, you always have the opportunity to rewrite your story. Always have the opportunity to choose a different path. You do. And even in the darkest moment, when it feels like you don't, you do. You have an opportunity to say, this is how I'm going to determine my life will be. Regardless of how much money I make, regardless of how much education I have, regardless of anything, I am choosing to do this. And set a plan. I like to call myself the girl with a plan. Because when you have a plan, when chaos arrives,
Yes.
you know what to do. You're the one in control. It doesn't get you to this place of being panicked, and it doesn't get you to this space of feeling like you're a failure, because now you have tools. You have developed tools for yourself. I am the if that, then what girl. It drives everybody in my life crazy. But when situations happen, I'm like, we got a plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do this right here. And if that doesn't work, then we got plan C. And if we got plan D and plan E, we're going to do, if we got to go to plan Z, guess what? We're going to plan Z. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to get stuck right here because we feel like we have no options. Because we do have options. As long as you have breath in your body, you have options. As long as you can make decisions for yourself, you have options. You just may need to educate yourself on what decisions you may have or what your options may be, but it does not mean that you do not have them. We all have options. So take your power back. Recognize that you are powerful. Recognize that you are amazing. Recognize that you are lovable, and recognize that you are not your mistake. Stop carrying the burden of somebody else's choice. It is not yours to carry. Let it go. Let it all go.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. Reverend Johnson Beasley?
Yes, so just few closing words of encouragement, thinking about this whole grief and trauma. We serve a God who's a God of love, but God is also a God of justice. And there's a scripture in Nahum chapter 1 that says, the Lord is slow to anger and great in power. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished. So when we're going through and dealing with grief and trauma, we may wonder what's going to happen to that person. We can rest assured that accounting day comes for everybody, and that God will level the playing field and he will right the wrongs. And so the Lord also offers some words of encouragement so that we would have peace. And he said, in this world, we are going to have trouble, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. The last two things, when we think about grief and trauma, the Lord said, I am close to the brokenhearted, and I save those who are crushed in spirit. So when we are crushed in our spirit, there is a God who is keenly aware and cares about us. And the Lord is also the great comforter, and he heals the brokenhearted. And God can bind up wounds in a way that we can never imagine, but just come to him, get connected to a community of faith, husband, mother, brother, a prayer partner. I thank God for my husband who can lay hands and pray with me. It helps and it makes a difference. And then as Dr. Rod said, when we need that subject matter expert, pray. But as we're praying, make plans and prepare to use the other resources that the Lord has made available. I by giving knowledge and wisdom, intelligence to those who are in various fields. So in all that we're seeing and experiencing, the trauma and grief, there is a great God who loves us and cares for us and promised to see us through.
Thank you. To the esteemed panel tonight, Dr. Ross, Dr. Hall, Reverend Johnson Beasley, I say thank you to each of you for being with us tonight, for adding some sunshine, some light, some joy to our attendees. And to our attendees, thank you for being with us. Thank you for hanging out with us for an hour and a half. You are a gift to us, and we hope that we have been a gift to you. Thank you, everybody. Until next time, be safe and God bless you.